Look into the obsidian mirror and face the truth that the world has been trying to hide from you for so long. We explore the dark reflections of our society and the hidden beauty that lies within the shadows. Click subscribe now and see yourself in a completely new light.
Never thought I'd become the kind of person who checks a lock twice before leaving his own driveway. I used to laugh at people who installed cameras on their mailboxes or put motion sensors on every corner of their house. I thought that was paranoia. Now I have 4 cameras, a video doorbell, and a smart lock that sends me a notification every single time someone opens my front door. I check it obsessively, even when I'm just running to the gas station. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Wade Corrigan. I'm 47 years old, and I've been a traveling pharmaceutical sales rep for going on 19 years. I cover a territory that stretches from western Tennessee through parts of Kentucky and into southern Ohio. In a good month, I'm home maybe 8 days. In a bad month, less than that. My wife and I divorced 4 years ago. Not because of the travel, she'd say, but I think we both know the travel didn't help. We were better as co-parents than as spouses, and honestly, our daughter gets the best version of both of us now, so I've made my peace with it. I own a small ranch house in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a carport, and a backyard with a fire pit. I've used maybe a dozen times since I bought the place. I got it after the divorce because it was practical. Good school district, close to the interstate, easy to maintain alone. A real estate agent friend of mine described it as move-in ready and low maintenance, which turned out to be a polite way of saying it had no personality. I spent 2 years making it feel like a home. New floors, a decent couch, photos of my daughter on the refrigerator. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. That's what makes what happened feel so personal. Not the money, not the hassle, the violation of something I'd built with my own hands, my own choices, my own paycheck. It started on a Tuesday in March. I was in Lexington, Kentucky, wrapping up a week of hospital visits when I got a text from my HOA management company. The message was from a woman named Donna at Riverside Property Solutions, the company that handles our neighborhood association. The text said, "Hi Wade, could you give me a call when you get a chance? It's not urgent, but I'd like to talk about something." Those messages never mean what they say. Not urgent always means urgent enough to put it in writing. I called her back from the parking garage of a Marriott courtyard. She answered on the second ring. "Wade, thanks for calling. I want to be upfront, this might be nothing, but I got a flag from the utility company. They send us notices when usage spikes on properties in the neighborhood, mostly because it can indicate a leak or an HVAC issue. Your unit is showing about 2.5 times your average monthly consumption." I didn't say anything for a second. I was in the middle of trying to process it. 2.5 times, I repeated. Yes, and separately. And again, this could be completely innocent. One of your neighbors, the gentleman who lives 2 doors down, mentioned to me that he's seen unfamiliar cars parked in your carport a few times over the past month or so. He thought you might have had company. I hadn't had anyone staying at my house. I hadn't mentioned to anyone that I'd be gone. I hadn't given out a key to a single person except my daughter, who was 12 and lived with her mother full time. "There shouldn't be any cars," I said. Donna was quiet for just a moment. "Wade, I think it might be worth coming home to take a look." I rescheduled my Thursday appointments and drove straight back to Murfreesboro that night. 7 hours with 1 stop for gas and a bad cup of coffee. I had the kind of drive where your hands are on the wheel but your mind is somewhere else entirely, running through every possible explanation, none of them good. I almost pulled onto my street when something made me slow down. I don't know what it was exactly. Instinct maybe, or just the residue of too many crime podcast episodes. Instead of turning into my driveway, I parked on the next block and sat there for a few minutes with the engine off, watching. My porch light was on. I'd had it on a timer since I bought the place. But behind the front window, I could see the faint blue pulse of a television, my television. I hadn't left it running. I sat in the car for 20 minutes. I watched a shadow cross the window once, moving from one room to the next. I watched the kitchen light come on briefly and then go off. Someone was in there, comfortable enough to move around without any urgency, like they had every right to be there. I drove to a Hampton Inn near the interstate and lay awake until 2 in the morning. The next morning I did what, in hindsight, I should have done the night before. I called the Murfreesboro Police non-emergency line. The officer I spoke with was patient. He explained that if someone was inside with a key and claimed permission, it became complicated, more of a civil dispute than a criminal matter. He advised me to document what I could, get security footage if possible, and come back with evidence before making any accusations. I understood the logic. I didn't like it, but I understood it. I drove to a Best Buy on the south side of town and spent about $400 on 3 interior wireless cameras and a video doorbell. The kind that stores everything in the cloud, so even if someone finds them and destroys them, the footage is already uploaded. I also picked up a small laptop I could use to monitor the feeds remotely while I stayed at the hotel. Then I drove to my house. It was mid-morning on a Thursday. I parked 2 streets over, walked around the back through the alley, and let myself in through the back door with my key. The house felt different the moment I stepped inside. It's hard to describe. It wasn't dirty exactly, but it wasn't mine. There was a coffee maker on the counter, not mine, still warm. A pair of men's sneakers by the back door, size 11 or 12, tan and black, brand new looking. There was a gym bag hanging on the coat hook where I normally kept my jacket. I walked through slowly, trying not to move anything. There were dishes in the drying rack I didn't own. A phone charger plugged in behind the couch. The throw blanket I kept folded on the armchair was spread across the sofa like someone had been sleeping under it. In the bathroom off the hallway, there was a shaving kit on the counter and a razor that wasn't mine. I checked the spare bedroom. The twin bed in there, which I kept made up but never used, had been slept in. Not just once. The pillow had a dent in it. The sheets were wrinkled in that specific way that comes from several nights of use. Then I checked my bedroom. The door was closed. I opened it. The bed was made, mine, but not the way I make it. There were 2 throw pillows arranged differently, and on the nightstand there was a glass of water and a novel with a receipt being used as a bookmark. A receipt from a Walgreens about a mile from my house. I stood there in the doorway for a long time. Someone wasn't just using my house. They were living in it. Sleeping in my bed, drinking coffee in my kitchen, hanging their gym bag on my hook, using my address like it was their address. I set up the cameras carefully, taking my time. One in the living room, positioned behind a row of books on the shelves along the east wall. One in the kitchen, angled above the cabinets near the range hood. One in the hallway to catch movement between the bedrooms, and the doorbell camera facing the carport and front wall. I tested the app 3 times on my phone to make sure the feeds were live. Then I locked up, walked back to my car the same way I'd come, and checked back into the Hampton Inn. I ordered delivery Thai food and sat on the hotel bed with my laptop open and waited. At 3:52 that afternoon, the doorbell camera buzzed. A man walked up my front path carrying a reusable grocery bag and a 6-pack of beer. He was somewhere around 35, average height, stocky build, dark hair cut close on the sides. He was wearing a gray Tennessee Titans hoodie and khaki work pants. He looked like half the men I see at any gas station in Middle Tennessee. He pulled a key from his jacket pocket and opened my front door without any hesitation. Without looking around, without any behavior that suggested he felt like he was doing anything wrong. He walked into my house like he owned it. I watched through the kitchen camera as he put the groceries away, in my refrigerator, in my cabinets. He helped himself to a glass from my cabinet and filled it with water from the tap. He sat down on my couch and turned on my television and watched something for about 40 minutes before getting up and going to the spare bedroom. I sat in that hotel room and watched it all on a 4-inch screen. Over the next 4 days, I documented his routine. He came and went twice a day, usually mid-morning and late afternoon. He worked out. I'd hear the creak of the floor through the audio feed when he was doing what sounded like push-ups or jumping jacks in the spare room. He cooked simple things, pasta and eggs, the smell of which I can only imagine lingering in my kitchen. He watched television most evenings and was in bed by 11. It wasn't until the second day that something else happened. A woman arrived at 6:15 in the evening. She was in her mid-40s, professionally dressed, blazer, slacks, carrying a leather portfolio. She knocked. The man answered. They clearly knew each other. A brief hug at the door. A quick exchange I couldn't make out. She came in, set her portfolio on my dining room table, and they sat down together. I watched them go through documents. She had a printed sheet of something and a tablet propped up on the table. They were talking and pointing at the screen together. It looked like a business meeting. I zoomed in as far as the camera quality allowed. The document on the tablet was hard to read, but I caught the shape of it. Columns, a calendar format, numbers that looked like dollar amounts. I took screenshots. That night I started searching. I typed my address into the Verbo search bar first and got nothing. Then I tried Airbnb. My house was listed as cozy Nashville area retreat, perfect for traveling professionals. The photos were of my living room, my kitchen, the backyard with my fire pit. The description mentioned the neighborhood's proximity to downtown Murfreesboro and the easy highway access. It talked about a quiet residential setting with all the comforts of home. The nightly rate was $189. There were 11 reviews, all 5 stars, going back 2 months. Great for a short work stay. Host was easy to communicate with, felt like home. Very clean and well-stocked, loved the neighborhood, very peaceful. Host. They were calling whoever was running this scheme the host of my property. I sat with the laptop on my knees and just breathed for a while. This wasn't someone squatting. This wasn't a desperate situation, a homeless man who'd found an unlocked window. This was organized, deliberate, and it had been running for at least 2 months, with 11 paying guests who had no idea they were staying somewhere without the owner's knowledge. I pulled up the listing profile. The host name was Willow Stay Rentals. No photo, no identifying information. I spent the rest of the evening working backwards. I searched every variation of Willow Stay Rentals across every platform I could think of: Airbnb, Google, Facebook, Instagram. I found a Facebook page that had been dormant for 2 months but had been used briefly to promote short-term rentals in the Middle Tennessee area. The account was linked to a name, Devin Marsh. I searched Devin Marsh, Murfreesboro. LinkedIn showed a profile listing him as an independent property coordinator with experience in short-term rental management. His profile photo matched the man I'd been watching on my cameras for 4 days. The woman was harder to identify. I hadn't caught her name on the camera audio, but on the 3rd day, she came back, and this time, the front door camera caught the tail end of their conversation as she was leaving. "Same protocol for the next 2 properties," she said. "The one on Northfield is available starting Friday." He nodded. "I'll get the listing up today. 2 properties." Then I thought about what she'd said. The one on Northfield. This wasn't just my house. They had a rotation. I kept watching. On the 4th day, an older man arrived. He was maybe 60, driving a white work van with a logo on the side I couldn't fully make out at first. I took a screenshot and enlarged it, a blue wrench over a house outline. I ran a Google image search. It matched the logo for Middle Tennessee Home Services, a property maintenance and management company. I checked their website. They offered full-service property management for homeowners who travel frequently, including key storage and routine property access coordination. I had hired them 8 months earlier. I'd signed up for their basic plan. They held a spare key, did quarterly walkthroughs, and handled any minor maintenance issues while I was on the road. I'd never had a problem with them. I'd given them my travel schedule every month because they asked for it as part of their service. It was all there in the contract I'd signed without thinking twice. The man who visited Devin that day matched the description of a field agent from that company. When he turned toward my doorbell camera, I could just barely read his employee badge. First name started with an R. I couldn't get the last name. I called Donna at Riverside Property Solutions that afternoon. "Donna, does your HOA use Middle Tennessee Home Services for any of the neighborhood properties?" "They do maintenance on a few of the units, yes." "Why?" I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time. "Wade, you need to document all of this and go to the police. Not the non-emergency line. Go in person." I was already 1 step ahead. The next morning, I drove to the Murfreesboro Police Department and asked to speak with a detective. I was directed to a detective named Carla Benson, a woman in her late 40s who had the manner of someone who has heard stranger things than this and wasn't especially surprised. She listened to my story, looked through my screenshots, watched several clips from my camera footage on my laptop, and then she made a call. "This is more than trespassing," she said. "What you're describing is wire fraud, theft of services, and depending on how the key situation checks out, we're probably looking at conspiracy. If there's an employee from a property management company involved, that's breach of fiduciary duty at minimum and likely criminal breach of trust." She told me to keep monitoring and not to change anything at the house that would tip them off. She assigned a case number and told me she'd be in touch within 48 hours. 2 days later, she called back. They'd identified the man from Middle Tennessee Home Services. His name was Raymond Grubb, and he'd been with the company for 3 years. When detectives pulled his employment records and cross-referenced the properties he was assigned to service, they found a pattern. 5 homes in the Middle Tennessee area, all owned by people who traveled frequently, all of whose spare keys were held by Middle Tennessee Home Services, all currently listed under shell names on Airbnb and Vrbo. Detective Benson told me that Devin Marsh had approached Grubb about a year earlier. The deal was simple. Grubb provided access and schedules, Devin managed the listings and the guests, and the woman, who turned out to be Grubb's cousin, a marketing consultant named Adrian, last name I wasn't given, handled photography, copywriting, and the back-end management of payments. They made over $61,000 across the 5 properties. My house alone had generated $22,000 in rental income that I had never seen a dollar of. The sting happened on a Saturday afternoon in April, 3 weeks after I first called the police. Detectives waited until Devin was at my property doing a pre-check before a guest arrived for a 2-night stay. They knocked on my front door, and arrested him in my living room. Adrienne was picked up separately at her apartment. Raymond Grubb was arrested at his home the same morning. I was there. I'd asked Detective Benson if I could be, and she'd allowed it, having me stay at the curb. I watched Devin come out of my house in handcuffs. He looked confused more than anything, like the reality of it hadn't caught up with him yet. The guest he'd booked for that weekend, a young man from Atlanta visiting for a bachelor party, had no idea. He called the number on the listing and got no answer. He left a 1-star review 2 days later saying the host had ghosted him. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The charges were substantial. Devin Marsh faced wire fraud, theft, breaking and entering, and conspiracy. Adrienne faced the same conspiracy charge plus fraud counts related to the fraudulent listings. Raymond Grubb was charged with breach of fiduciary duty, theft by conversion, and conspiracy. His employer, Middle Tennessee Home Services, was notified and he was terminated before the ink was dry on the arrest report. The trial was 8 months later. I testified. I sat on the stand and walked the courtroom through every camera clip, every screenshot, every timestamp. Devin's lawyer argued that the listings constituted a legitimate subletting arrangement that had gotten out of hand legally. The prosecutor made short work of that. There was no subletting agreement. I had never consented to my property being used. There was no ambiguity. Devin got 22 months in state custody and 3 years probation. Adrienne received 14 months and was ordered to complete community service. Raymond Grubb cooperated and received a suspended sentence with probation and was ordered to make restitution. All 3 were jointly ordered to pay back the 5 property owners a combined total of $61,000, divided proportionally. My share came out to just under $19,000. On paper, that covered my losses and then some. The utility overages, the new locks, the security system I installed after everything was over, even the hotel stays during the investigation. But there are costs that don't show up in a restitution calculation. I couldn't sleep in my own bed for the first month after the arrest. I'd lie there and think about the reviews on that listing, all the strangers who'd used my bathroom, gone through my kitchen, slept under my roof without knowing whose home they were in. One of them had left a review that said the place had a warm, lived-in feel. I read that and felt something close to nausea. I changed every lock and every door code before I spent another night there. I had the carpets cleaned and the mattress replaced. I repainted the spare room. I did everything I could to make it feel like mine again. It took the better part of a year. The other 4 homeowners and I ended up connected through the experience. One of them, a woman who worked for a medical device company and traveled to the Northeast every other week, told me she'd cried when she found out strangers had been using her spare bathroom. Another, a man who did contract engineering work and was gone most of the month, discovered that one of the guests had poked through his personal files in the home office. He spent months dealing with the fallout. That kind of violation doesn't end when the handcuffs go on. Middle Tennessee Home Services shut down within 5 months of the arrests. The owners issued a statement saying Raymond had acted entirely without their knowledge, but they couldn't survive the liability. 3 civil suits were filed against them by property owners. I was part of one. We settled out of court for an amount I'm not allowed to disclose, but it was enough to feel like the settlement meant something. I still live in the same house. Some days I wonder why. Some days I think I stayed because leaving would mean they won. That what happened to this place gets to define it forever. I don't want that. I want to reclaim it completely. But I won't pretend that the house feels exactly the same. I've changed things. The fire pit in the backyard gets used more now. I actually have neighbors over occasionally, people I never bothered to get to know when I was just passing through. My next-door neighbor, an older retired man named Gil, who's lived on our street for 22 years, is the one who'd noticed the unfamiliar cars and mentioned it to Donna. I brought him a bottle of good bourbon after the trial, and we sat on his porch for 2 hours talking. I should have introduced myself years ago. That's one of the things I think about most. Not the fraud, not the money, not even the violation of my space. I think about all the years I treated that house like a storage unit between work trips. I never knew my neighbors' names. I never told anyone explicitly that no one should be there when I was gone. I never paid close enough attention to my own utilities or my own front door to notice the problem myself. It took strangers profiting from my absence to make me realize I'd been absent. Even when I was there, I still traveled the same territory. Tennessee, Kentucky, Southern Ohio, 5 days a week sometimes, week after week. The road hasn't changed, and I don't expect it to. But now when I come home, I actually come home. I know which car belongs in Gil's driveway. I know the names of the couple across the street and their dog's name, too. I have a group text with 3 neighbors, and we check in on each other's houses. I also check my Airbnb listing every month now. Not because I expect to find my house there again, but because it takes 30 seconds, and I'd rather spend those 30 seconds than spend 3 weeks in a hotel watching camera footage of someone else living my life. If you own a home and you travel for work, I want you to hear this clearly. The locks on your doors are only as good as the people who have keys to them. That seems obvious. I thought I understood it. I didn't. Check who has access to your property and under what circumstances. Read the actual contracts you sign with property management companies, the ones that give them rights to enter, to hold keys, to share your schedule. Search your own address on every rental platform once a month. It takes less time than you think, and the alternative is far worse. Build relationships with the people who live near you, not for the company, for the information. The people on your street see things you don't see when you're on the road. They noticed something was wrong at my house before I did. If I'd known Gil well enough for him to feel comfortable texting me directly instead of mentioning it in passing to an HOA manager, I might have caught this 2 months earlier. Install cameras. I know it feels like an overreaction if nothing has ever happened to you. It felt that way to me too. Now those cameras feel like the most rational thing I've ever done. And if you discover something like this, don't go in alone. Don't confront the person. Don't change the locks and declare victory before you know the full picture. I understand the impulse, believe me. I sat in that hotel parking lot every evening wanting to knock on my own front door and demand answers. But if I'd done that, I'd have a trespasser with a story and no real case. Instead, I have a conviction. Document everything. Let the evidence do the work. Let the system do what it's designed to do and then show up to testify. Your home is the one place in this world that's supposed to be completely yours. I know that sounds like something you'd read on a throw pillow at HomeGoods, but I mean it in a practical, specific sense. It's the place where your things are, where your daughter's school photos are on the refrigerator, where you've chosen every object and every arrangement. It's the accumulation of your choices. Don't let anyone treat it like inventory. And if they do, if you come home to unfamiliar sneakers by your back door and a coffee maker that isn't yours and a book on your nightstand with someone else's receipt holding the page, don't panic. Take a breath. Park on the next block, call the detective. Build the case. Then watch them walk out of your front door in handcuffs. It's worth the wait. I think about cause and effect a lot more than I used to. Not in any mystical sense, just the plain mechanical version of it. Every choice has a downstream consequence, and sometimes the consequences show up years later wearing a disguise you don't recognize until it's standing in your living room watching your television. The way I see it now, what happened to my house didn't start with Devin or Raymond or Adrian. It started with me. With years of treating my home like a layover stop between routes, I signed a contract I didn't fully read. I handed over my schedule to a company because it was convenient. I never learned my neighbor's name. I never once thought to search my own address on a rental platform. None of those things felt like failures at the time. They felt like reasonable shortcuts, the kind of small inattentions that accumulate quietly until someone else decides to profit from them. That's the thing about negligence. It doesn't announce itself. It just creates space, and the wrong people are very good at finding space. What I respect, looking back, is that the moment I understood something was wrong, I made myself slow down. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to walk up to my own front door and demand answers. I didn't. That restraint. Sitting in a hotel parking lot night after night, watching camera feeds on a laptop, building a file instead of throwing a punch. That was the hardest part. And it was the only part that mattered in the end. Detective Benson told me later that the footage I collected was the backbone of the entire prosecution. Without it, Devon's lawyer would have had room to maneuver. With it, there was nowhere to go. Intelligence without patience is just impulsiveness dressed up. I've been impulsive before in my life, and it has cost me. This time I chose differently, and I watched 3 people walk out of a courtroom with convictions because of it. As for the ethics of what Devon and Raymond and Adrienne did, I don't think they thought of themselves as villains. That's the part that unsettles me most. They had a system, they had spreadsheets, they had a brand name, Willow Stay Rentals, like it was a legitimate business. They rationalized what they were doing as property optimization or something equally bloodless. But what they were actually doing was deciding that my privacy, my space, my sense of safety in my own home was worth less than their profit margin. They made that calculation about 5 families without losing a night's sleep over it. That's a failure of character so fundamental I'm not sure there's a word clean enough for it. What I hope anyone takes from my experience is this. The quality of your life is largely determined by the quality of your attention. Pay attention to your contracts. Pay attention to your utility bills. Pay attention to your neighbors, to the small irregularities, to the quiet things that feel slightly off. The warning signs were there for 2 full months before Donna texted me. I just wasn't paying attention. And when something is wrong, act on it with your head, not just your gut. Gather evidence. Call the right people. Trust the process even when it's slow and frustrating, and you want to skip straight to the part where justice happens. The shortcut usually costs more than the long way around. Gil, my retired neighbor 2 doors down, is the one who noticed the cars. He didn't know me well enough to call me directly. That's on me. Now he has my number saved and instructions to use it freely. I brought him a bottle of Blanton's after the trial, and we shook hands on my porch, and I thanked him for paying attention when I wasn't. That's where I want to end this. Not with the handcuffs, not with the restitution check, with a handshake on my own front porch, between 2 neighbors who finally know each other's names. Everything that came before that moment, the hotel nights, the camera footage, the courtroom, the whole long year of it, was the price of a lesson I should have learned for free. I'm glad I learned it. I just wish it hadn't cost so much.